Well, welcome. I am so excited that you're here this morning. We are smack dab in the middle of a series, actually in week 3 of a series that's called Choose a Side. And this series is all about missions and outreach. And for the last 2 weeks, our first 2 weeks in this series, we've looked at a story out of the Old Testament. Actually, it's a story out of the book of Exodus about the nation of Israel. And as we've looked at that story, we've looked for insight as to how we as a church, or how we as a gathering of people, or how we as individuals should respond to the world around us. Specifically, we've been looking at how we're supposed to share and show the love of Jesus with others. And then even more specifically, we've talked about how do we help meet the needs of those that are hurting out there, those that are struggling, those that are hungry. And so if you've missed any of the last couple weeks, I would strongly encourage you to go online to icommunitychurch.com and give those messages a listen. But if you're new here, if this is your first time here, or maybe you're newer to Community Church, or you missed these first couple weeks, you couldn't have picked a better series to come in. Because this subject, missions and outreach, is core to who we are as a church. It's the foundation that we try to build upon. It's what we try and strive to be our identity within the communities we live. And last week, what I shared with you is something that I honestly believe that if the church could get this thing right, if Community Church could get this one thing right, it would be more effective in reaching others with the good news of Jesus than any sermon I could ever preach or any Bible study we could ever put on here as a church. And that is that we need to stop wasting so much time, so much energy, so much emotion on trying to choose which side is right or wrong, argue about this side is right or this side is wrong. And that we as a church need to stop focusing on the bickering between each other and actually focus on what we were called to do as a church. And that's to share and show the love of Jesus to others. And so last week we looked at that, and we looked at how God has given each of us a burden and a passion inside us for a social problem that's in our world or an issue. And that those passions and burden probably indicate what you're closest to. It probably indicates what God wants you to lean into, to look for an organization or a ministry that you can get involved with to make an impact. And we talked about how he's uniquely gifted each of us with talents and abilities, but quite honestly, the most lacking resource in any ministry, whether it's our church or another ministry, is just a willing heart and available time and available energy. And so then after I was finished speaking last week, Clarity came up. Clarity is one of our ministry partners. They spoke to us about the passion and burden that God has given them for those that are faced with an unexpected or unwanted pregnancy. They talked about how they work to inform and educate and provide clinical services around the risks associated with sexual activity, and then even how they provide counseling to those who may have hurt in those areas, have loss in one of those areas in their lives. And at the end of the service, you were given an opportunity not just to chat more with the folks from Clarity, but to actually get involved in what they're doing. And we gave you an opportunity to sign up, to volunteer, to look for opportunities within their organization. If you weren't here last week, or maybe you were here last week and you thought, I'm not quite ready yet, or the table had a line and you didn't want to wait, it's not too late for you to sign up for interest in Clarity. You can actually go on that connection card in your bulletin and mark it there, or you can text CC Clarity, that's CC for Community Church Clarity, to 97000. You'll get a really quick text back that's just an informational form, and someone will then reach out to you. And this morning, I am very, very excited for the ministry partner that we have with us today. Safe Passage is going to be sharing with you about the burden and passion that God has given them. And you're going to do a lot more than just learn and know today. Trust me. You're going to hear stories of not just how Safe Passage has an impact on lives, but how they save lives. And so we're so blessed to have a ministry partner like Safe Passage with us today. And if you're newer to Community Church and you're not sure what a ministry partner is just an individual or an organization who is actively sharing and showing the love of Jesus with others. And then we as a church have the privilege of coming alongside them financially. In fact, 10% of everything that is given to Community Church, anything that you guys give to Community Church, we take 10% and we give it back to our ministry partners in support of the great work that they're doing. But even now, like we just started the message, and I know what some of you are thinking, right? You guys have already kind of maybe jumped to the punchline of today, right? Some of you are thinking right now, John, I know where you're going with this. I mean, you could save us all 10 minutes and sit down right now. I know where this is heading, right? That you're talking about having an impact on communities around us. You're talking about sharing and showing the love of Jesus. You guys talk about that all the time. I get it. So what do you want from me, right? What do you want from me? How do I need to get involved? What's next? And I get it. I get why. I mean, just by a show of hands, and this is going to embarrass me, how many people have I individually asked in this room to get involved or volunteer for something in the last 2 years, 3 years? Yeah, I apologize. Yeah, see. And I know we just talked about Fall Festival. We just had that yesterday. We had our free oil change event just a month ago that a lot of you were involved in. We've talked about Operation Christmas Child. Guess what? Christmas Families is right around the corner. And I know that a lot of you serve in one or more areas here at Community Church. I know a lot of you serve in other organizations. And so when we start talking about missions and outreach, when we start talking about impacting others and showing Jesus' love, some of our minds immediately jump to, what's next? How am I going to be asked to get involved? And that makes sense. I get that. But for a few minutes this morning, before we invite our friends up from Safe Passage, I just want to share with you a little bit about the why. Because I think if we understand why we should potentially respond, it helps with the what and the how. So quick audience participation here. This is really simple. Don't overthink this. I want you to raise your hand if you're here and you're a parent today. Raise your hand if you're a parent. Now keep your hands raised. Keep your hands raised if you're a parent. All right, great. So for those of you that don't have your hands raised, you then raise your hands if you've ever been a child, if you've ever been a kid or a child. Raise your hands. This is awesome. I did not expect 100% participation. This is great. So this applies to all of us. You can put your hands down. All right. So do you remember what it was like when you were a kid, or maybe you remember when your kids got into arguments with other kids? Anybody remember that? All right, it might have been over a toy, could have been over a TV show, could have been over who got to go first in line, whatever it was. You got in an argument with another kid. And then either as a parent or your parents, you probably heard this phrase 100 times. You ready? It goes like this. It says, go ahead, tell them you're sorry. Right? How many people have heard that? Go ahead, tell them you're sorry. Yeah, we've all heard that 100 times. Or the better one is hug your brother, hug it out. Come on, let them know you. Let's finish this off. Hug your sister, shake hands with that teammate. We've all been there, right? We've all done that. And how does that usually go down? All right, how does that happen? Right? Now in my household, the sorry goes a little bit like this. Sorry, right? Sorry, I'm sorry. Well, me too. Or you got that awkward hug. You remember that awkward hug when you're going to hug your brother or sister? It's like they're made of flames. You do not want to hug them. It's so painful. So when that happens, let me ask you a question. Does that solve anything? Does it solve anything? Usually not. It usually doesn't. In our house, it rarely does. And why is that? Well, I'd suggest to you the why is because the what and the how of what we're doing, the I'm sorry or the hug or the handshake, that's just a what or a how, right? And that's external. That's on the outside of us. We're just shaking a hand or trying to give a lame hug. But the why points to the attitude of our hearts. The why we do something points to our willingness. It's the why that creates some sincerity. And so when we're faced with missions and outreach, when we're faced with volunteer opportunities or opportunities to get involved, our minds initially go to what or how, what do I need to do, or how do I need to do it? And a lot of times we say yes, right? We'll say, okay, I'll do it. And we do it. But our hearts aren't in it. The attitude of our hearts is not there for the right reason. The why isn't there. And so we're going to look this morning, we're going to look at a writing by a man named John in 1 John chapter 3 and get a little more insight as to why we should respond in opportunities like this. So if you have your Bibles, you can turn to 1 John chapter 3. If you don't have your Bibles, you can find a Bible app real quick, or I'm going to have it on the screen behind me here, and you can just follow along. So we're in 1 John chapter 11, and as I said before, John was written by a man named John. Come on, that was like a softball, right? John was written by John, and John was an apostle, right? He was a disciple of Jesus who had spent time with Jesus during his ministry. And John's older in age as he writes this, but we're going to start in verse 11. And John says this. He says, "For this is the message you heard from the beginning. We should love one another. So John's writing to other believers in this letter. He's writing to the church. He's writing to other Jesus followers. And he kind of puts this vanilla statement we just talked about. Yeah, you need to love one another. And for John, this would have been a big deal because he heard Jesus teach this personally so many times. In fact, right before Jesus was crucified, Jesus looked at the disciples and said, hey, you need to love one another just as I've loved you. But John knew that the early church, that early first century Jesus followers, they didn't quite understand this either, right? It seems like an easy command, Jesus, but even how does this whole love thing work? And so what John does for us in one single verse is he connects the what and the why in the same verse. And that's verse 16. He goes on to say, this is how we know what love is. That Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. So if you wonder what love is, if maybe it's just being kind or trying to be nice to someone, no, that's not it. If you wonder why we should love others, is it because it's the right thing to do or because someone told us so or because I'm up here telling you so? Nope, that's not it. John says, you want to know what love is? Christ gave his life for you. That's what love is. Do you want to know why we should love others? Well, same answer. Christ gave his life for you. In fact, John would point out that Jesus showed us the most sacrificial and purest form of love ever, almost 2,000 years ago. The Bible tells us that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So before we even knew who Jesus was, or before we cared who Jesus was, or before we even took a step in his direction, he still died for us. That's what love is. That's both the what and the why. And so John goes on in that verse and he says, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. Now, very few, if any of us, will have the opportunity to actually give our lives away, right? But what we will have the opportunity to do is give away our comfort, our needs, our wants, our preferences, our resources. It's not easy. But that's what love is. Love is putting others' needs ahead of our own. And so all those things that compose our life, we can give those away. And then John pens a verse that I have to be honest with you, I have wrestled with as I've written this message. It is just such a powerful verse. Verse 17, John writes, if anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of Jesus be in them? Ouch, right? That's a tough verse to read. I mean, if you tuned out for a second, or maybe you're trying to take that one in, I'm going to reread that one because it's just so powerful. If anyone has material possessions, if you have the ability to help, and you see a brother or sister in need, but you don't take pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? That's a tough verse. Now, John doesn't use the word want here. He uses the word need, right? Because just because you love someone doesn't mean you need to give them what they want. God loves us. He doesn't give us everything we want. If you're parents and you love your children, you don't give them everything they want. But we do give them needs, right? And we know a need when we see one. We know the difference. Food, water, those are needs. Warmth, clothing, shelter, a safe environment, those are needs. Justice, protection from abuse, appropriate care when someone's hurting, those are all needs. We know needs when we see them. And as a pastor, I'll be honest with you, I'll just be completely transparent. As a pastor at a church, we get asked all the time. We have requests come in all the time for people that need help or want help. And it is so hard to know what's a need and what's a want and what's being real and what's not. And so this is a challenging verse. So my staff in Batesville, we had a lengthy discussion on this verse this week. This is hard for us to wrestle with. In fact, if you're not wrestling with that this morning, I'd suggest you read this throughout the week. Mark this in your Bible, read it every day, because this should be a convicting verse. And so what's John's point? Well, he sums it up in verse 18. He says, "Let us not love with words or with speech, but with actions and in truth." So if you ever wondered why missions and outreach is core to who we are as a church, or if you ever wondered, why are we so passionate about getting people involved, about asking you to serve, whether it's here at the church or with our ministry partners? Why do we give 10% away to organizations and other individuals? Well, this is why. Because we can talk about love all we want, right? I could preach on it till I'm blue in the face. In fact, we could look for the next year over every single verse in the Bible that says anything about love. And then we could memorize them all together. And then you know what'll be cool? We'll all go out and get love one another matching tattoos on our arms. We can all do that. But none of that matters until we do something about it, until we act. Until we do something about it, it doesn't reflect the sacrificial love that Jesus showed us on the cross. And so because I share John's namesake, and he was a little bit direct, I'm going to be a little direct this morning. Be a little personal. Unless each of you share the love of Jesus through action, right? Unless someone sees the love of Jesus in what we do, why would they even care about who Jesus is? Why would they even want to know about his love? Because if they can't see it inside us, they don't even know it's there. And those are tough words. Those are hard words, which is why I'm really glad John wrote them and I just get to read them to you. But then John sums it up beautifully in verse 23, and he says this, "And this is his command, this is God's command, to believe in the name of his Son, Jesus Christ, and to love one another as he commanded us." And if they had microphones back then, that would have been John's cue for a mic drop, because that's about it right there. It doesn't get any better than that. And so as we invite Safe Passage up, as we hear about what they're doing in their ministry, I want to leave you with a different question this week to wrestle with and think about. And the question is this: what would our communities look like? What would our communities look like if we could put his love into action? What would our world look like if we could put his love into action? Not just words, not just things we talk about on a Sunday, but we put them into action in our everyday lives. So a few years ago, when I joined the church and came on to the mission and outreach team, one of the first things I did was reach out to Safe Passage. We have the luxury and the benefit of them being literally right down the road from us in Batesville. And over the years, I can't tell you how much I've come to appreciate this organization, come to appreciate the individuals that volunteer there. I'm going to ask Jane Yorn in just a second. I want you to sit. I'm going to embarrass you just for a second. So Jane's the executive director and one of the founders. And I still remember the first time we had coffee together and got to chat, and we've had many coffees since. I find Jane to be a kindred spirit. She is very passionate about what she does. She's also a bit of a workaholic, just like me. There's many times I'll pass her as she's pulling out of the parking lot, and I'll yell something like, "You should be home," and she'll yell something back like, "It takes one to know one." So she is a kindred spirit to me, but would you please join me in welcoming Jane Yorn from Safe Passage.
All right, so if you couldn't hear me, good morning. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for allowing us to be a ministry partner with Community Church. I've seen that love of Christ in action with many of you, and certainly with your leadership here. So we're deeply appreciative of that. Safe Passage started 22 years ago around a kitchen table, and I was one of the three women who was at that table trying to find resources for someone that we knew who was in a violent marriage. And there was nothing throughout all of Southeast Indiana to help that individual. And so at that time, we went to work. We sort of took that action call, and it was truly, it has been ministry ever since. I've only been involved in my role for the last 9 years as executive director. I was always a volunteer before that. But like most of you here, domestic violence is not part of my personal story. But I've had the privilege of knowing thousands of women and children and a few men who have been brave enough over the course of time to break free from lives of abuse. And you're going to get to hear from one of those today, and you're going to get to hear that very personal story so that you can truly understand and begin to feel how very serious of an issue this is. Because every 9 seconds in this country, through every economic group, every neighborhood, every church, someone experiences domestic or sexual abuse. Our helpline, and we're located with our shelter facility in Batesville, our helpline gets 700 to 800 calls a year, and that's people reaching out to us. And nearly every one of those people lives within an hour of where we are right now. So we've helped, in the course of our time, more than 14,000 individuals who have broken free from those lives of violence and abuse. But unfortunately, more than a dozen that I know of that have been part of our Safe Passage family have lost their lives. This is truly life-saving work that we do. And you're going to get to understand a little bit more through Amanda's story how that works. We have emergency shelter. It is highly secured, and that level of security is stronger, and it gets more necessary all the time because violence is escalating in our society at a rate that I can't even begin to describe. Our outreach services for all those people who don't need shelter, but they still need to have all the wraparound services that we provide. Maybe they need protective orders and case management. They need help finding jobs and safe, affordable housing and counseling services. All those things we can provide as well. And then because we know that most survivors take 7 times before they leave for good, because these are people that, just like we've talked about, these relationships started out very different than the way they've ended up. And so because of that, we've got incredibly dedicated staff who are very patient and will walk alongside someone for as long as they need. And because of that, only fewer than 10% of those who engage in services with us return to their abusive situation. We are very proud of that. Intervention is not the only way that we address this problem of abuse. We are also very involved in teen dating violence and at the college level, and those kind of services that we provide as well. So we have a whole team of social workers and professional teachers who go into schools and into the community, and from 2nd grade all the way through college level, and they focus on what healthy relationships should look like, and how to teach people how to end a relationship safely when there's red flags, and also to how to get involved with others, maybe someone that they know that is in a bad relationship. So if you would hear the stories I hear coming out of our young people today, dating violence would chill you, because it too is escalating through so many reasons with the media and you know what we have come as normalized in our society today. It is absolutely a frightening epidemic. So 1 year ago in October, and while this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we opened the region's first rape crisis center as well. We have named that Safe Place. And those services, too, as with all of the services that we provide, are all free and totally confidential. So those, we have support groups and we have counseling, and of course we do advocacy to hospitals and to other types of medical care facilities if someone has been sexually assaulted. But we want folks to know, and you can help us spread this message as one way that you can support Safe Passage, that they can reach out. They can reach out through that confidential helpline, and whether something happened last night or it happened 40 years ago and the opportunity has never been there to process it, that's what we are there to do. So your financial support in the past and hopefully in the future certainly is critical to us being able to move our mission and our ministry forward. So I would like to take this opportunity now to welcome Amanda Thompson to the stage. Amanda is one of our fabulous survivors, and she has a story that will allow you to understand on a very personal level what we hope to achieve when someone comes to us for help, healing, and hope through Safe Passage. Please welcome Amanda.
Now, I am certainly not as good as a speaker as she is, but God is good, huh? So I'm going to tell you a story. It's not pretty. It's shocking, and I just want you to know that domestic violence, drug addiction, it happens everywhere. It happens in wealthy families. It happens in poor families. It happens in small towns. It happens in big communities. I might cry, but I will get over it. My name is Amanda, and I would like to speak to you today about my domestic violence past and how I used services at Safe Passage to guide me on a journey to a happy, healthy new life. In 2012, I was struggling with prescription drugs. I moved from pills to meth to heroin to a needle within 3 years. I lost my kids and had a few visits to the county jail. I moved from Kentucky, from Indiana, to get a fresh start in 2015. I got a job in an apartment. At this time, I was able to have my 3-year-old living with me. I was finally doing good. In September 2015, I met Sebastian, aka my abuser. I'll probably refer to him a lot as my abuser. I thought he was the love of my life. He worked at the same job I did, and he was so kind and made me feel like no one had ever loved me like he loved me. It didn't take long before I was back using heroin, except this time I wasn't just using because it made me feel good and I wanted to. I was using because he used to, and he was controlling my drugs. The control started right away with drugs and how long I was allowed to be on the phone. If I was on the phone talking with someone, it had to be on speakerphone so he could hear what I was saying, what type of clothes I was allowed to wear, when I was allowed to shower. At first I thought, well, he just loves me and he cares about me. He's a little jealous. It's okay. In 2016, we got kicked out of our place. We were staying in Kentucky, and I came back home to what I knew. My dad helped us get set up in a trailer, bought his groceries, cleaning supply, and my family helped me with various things like plates, beddings. I'll tell you, my family set me up for success. All I had to do was follow through. I had hooked up with some old friends after a couple days. On May 27, 2016, my life changed forever. We were picked up by Jennings County Police Department for possession of syringes in a parking lot, waiting on money to come through where we were about to go score some heroin. We both went to jail. I sat there for about 2 months and found out I was pregnant. We were on our way to the city to get high that day. If I would have made it, my Grayson probably wouldn't have made it. I believe that God had mercy on me that day, and he saved my life and my unborn baby. I call him Grace, my saving grace. I spent another 2 months in jail and was released on house arrest. My wonderful daughter paid my first and last week's rent in a small efficiency apartment. I got my job at the reservation in Milan. New town, new start again. Life was good. I made just enough to pay the rent there and to pay my house arrest, and my abuser moved in with me, which was Grayson's dad. He was the one that I was arrested with. I was about 7 months pregnant. Things were good for a few weeks. I got him a job where I worked. We were close enough where we could walk to work, so we didn't need a car. I guess that's what you call the honeymoon phase. They cycled through different phases. My 17-year-old daughter came home, and I was getting my 6-year-old every other weekend. He started accusing me of cheating and saying that the baby that I was carrying wasn't his, and he wouldn't accept him until there was a DNA test done, and he just started getting violent. I mean, it started with jealousy things like the shower and the phone, and then it got to where he would just clothesline me as I was walking through the house. So I didn't even have to do anything wrong. He could have thought I was talking to somebody, and that was grounds for him to punish me. I was 8 months pregnant and was sitting on the end of the bed, and he was saying someone talked to me at work, and he backhanded me so hard I fell off the bed. He left a huge bruise. I fell to the floor crying. He came over and knelt down on the floor and told me to get up and quit crying and being a baby. That if I would have been a good girl, he wouldn't have had to do things like that. The closer it came to baby being here, the worse it got. I wasn't allowed to go nowhere except work and house arrest appointments. I delivered my baby with a black eye. I told everyone that I hit my head on the banister in the stairwell. Even the doctors believed me in the delivery room. Grace was born. He's my baby number 4, and I wanted my tubes tied. I had all my papers signed, ready to go. Obviously, I was a drug addict. I didn't even know if I was going to be able to take care of him. So I wanted my tubes tied. I didn't want to have any more. He threw a fit, and he told me if I got my tubes tied, when I got home, I would get it. So we didn't get my tubes tied. He wanted another baby because if he kept me pregnant, he could control me longer, and he knew that I would have a harder time leaving. The more kids you have, the harder time you have to leave. We came home from the hospital, and the abuse escalated so quickly. He was jealous of the baby. If I walked wrong, he would put my head through a wall. He was careful about leaving bruises, and when he did leave bruises, he would take me into the bathroom and do my makeup to cover up. One day I walked through the kitchen, and he was cooking, and he ran over and shoved me against the wall and held a hot skillet that he was cooking with to my face. I laid on the floor crying, and he goes and gets my 1-month-old Grace and says, "Why are you crying?" I said, "You burnt me." He said, "The skillet wasn't that hot." I had a blister on the whole side of my face. I told everybody that I hit the skillet on the stove and it fell off and hit my face as I was cooking grilled cheese. Some believed me, some didn't, but nobody asked questions. I got pretty good at lying. The abuse got so bad, my daughter left home. I would be nursing our son, and he would drag me out of the rocking chair with him in my arms. I just remember trying to protect his head as we fell to the floor. He's just over a month old. The night of May 1st, about 1 a.m., he woke me out of bed by dragging me away from our newborn baby. That night was the worst night. He held me down and he kicked me, he punched me, he pulled my hair. He finally let me lay back down after a few hours. He had to go to work at 6. Somehow I managed to upset him again because I didn't get up with him before work. So he drugged me out of bed again, punched me, kicked me. He actually spit dope back in my mouth because remember I was on house arrest. So he thought if he spit dope in my mouth, I wouldn't call the cops. That way he was protected. He was wrong. I had had enough. He went to the bathroom after he punched me in the eye, and I ran down the stairs. I left the baby laying in the bed because he was in the bathroom. I called 911. That day I was broken. I was beat down. I was sad. I was miserable. This is where I tell you guys the good part of the story. I'm not sad as I am telling you this because I am no longer that weak little girl. My boss from the reservation gave me time off, and the officer took us to Safe Passage. My journey began that day. The ladies helped me file a restraining order, and from that day I started rebuilding my life. I was scared to death. How on earth was I going to do this all on my own? I kept asking myself. I had a newborn baby and an apartment. I didn't know how I could afford it. I will tell you, I wasn't alone. I had God because I had gotten saved in this process. I had my family, and I had Safe Passage. My counselor, Tori, was absolutely amazing. I called her one day and I was like, Tori, I'm stuck. I was writing this story and she says, where you at? I'll come get you. So she was willing to just come get me. She had no clue. I was just stuck on the story, but they're pretty awesome over there. They've been by my side for over 2 years now. She goes to court dates with me, and she's brought me diapers and clothes and food for my family. They bought my kid Christmas gifts and Easter, and they even brought us an air conditioner at one point because the apartment was so hot. For anyone leaving a domestic violence situation, I recommend that you build your support team first. For me, that was Safe Passage. My pastor, my bosses at the reservation, my friends. I am now 3 years sober, will be 4 years sober in May. God is good. That's all I can say. God took me and he turned me around and he saved my baby. He is healthy. And I was using actively, so he actively saved me. I will tell you, God worked wonders on me. I'll be sober 4 years, May 24th, and I will be abuse-free 3 years in May. So everything kind of happened in May. So Safe Passage gave me the skills that I needed to protect myself and my family. They taught me a safety plan and how to live without my abuser. I would even call Tori and be like, Tori, I don't know what to do. And she's like, you've got to learn how to do this on your own, because I always had to ask him for permission to do everything. So I didn't know what I should do about any situation. I always had to get permission. So now I do everything on my own. They gave me a safety plan. I have recently made the decision to go back to college. I want to be a domestic violence counselor. If I would have known that something like this was available, I may have left sooner. And I just want to thank you guys. Thank you for your donations and your support, because if it wouldn't have been for this program, I would still be a drug addict, and I would still be in an abusive situation, and might not have my kids. So thank everybody here for supporting us.
Am I on? There we go. Thank you so much,
welcome.
Amanda, for sharing.
Thanks for having me.
Would you please welcome or thank Amanda again? So, if you couldn't tell already, it takes tremendous courage to be able to come up here and share a story. But it also takes tremendous hope, not just for her own life, but for what Safe Passage does in the lives of families every day. Now, for some of you, this might have really hit home. You might have grown up in a household where there was domestic violence. You may currently be in a household. You may know someone. Safe Passage is such a phenomenal organization, And while we are excited to be able to partner with them, while I just love that Jane spoke and Amanda got to share her story with you today, if all we did was write checks as a church, it really wouldn't be love, right? We show love by action. And so this is your opportunity right now to be able to learn more about Safe Passage, to be able to volunteer for what Safe Passage does. They have many different services which require many different volunteer types. Let me just tell you, they're a phenomenal group of people to work with and work alongside, and you will be able to truly put your love into action by partnering with them. So we have a table, or Safe Passage has a table set up in the back with a couple volunteers. I'm going to close really quickly here because your opportunity is to stand up, go back, ask questions, and sign up. If maybe you don't have time to stick around, you can text CC SAFE, that's CC for Community Church SAFE, to 97000, and we will reach back out to you to help connect you with Safe Passage. But the table is right over by the lit up Operation Christmas Child table. So thank you so much for being here. Again, thank you to Safe Passage for coming in today.